Stop whatever you're doing. Seriously, listen to this. 1 minute, I'm standing in the hallway of the house I paid for, arguing with the one person I thought I could trust with my life. The next minute, I'm on the sidewalk with 2 garbage bags of my clothes. He looked me dead in the eye and said the words that just froze the blood in my veins. He said, "Get out. This is my house now. And if you try to step foot on this property again, I'm calling the cops." And the worst part, the worst, most gut-wrenching, heart-shattering part, for a split second, I believed him. I actually thought, oh my God, I'm homeless. He just took everything. But then the adrenaline wore off, and one simple, undeniable, 4-word truth hit me like a train. A truth that was about to turn his entire world upside down. The deed. My name was still on the deed. Stay until the end, because the way I took this house back and the legal move that made him pay for every single minute of pain he put me through is something you absolutely need to hear. This is the story of how my ex, Mark, thought he could kick me out of my own home, and how he learned the hard way that you don't mess with property law. To understand the revenge, you have to understand the setup. Mark and I were together for 6 years. We were that couple. You know, the ones everyone said were going to make it. The house, this beautiful 3-bed, 2-bath house, was supposed to be our future. We bought it 3 years ago. Now here's where the trouble started. The house was listed for $350,000. We both agreed on the monthly mortgage payments. We were 50-50, right? Equal partners, except for one small detail, the down payment. I had been saving since I was 19, working 2 jobs, driving a beat-up car. I had managed to stack up $70,000. Mark, he had maybe $5,000. So, to make the deal happen, I dropped the entire $70,000 down payment, all 70,000 of my hard-earned dollars. Mark said, "Don't worry, babe. We're in this together. I'll make up for it over time." We put both our names on the mortgage and both our names on the title, listed as tenants in common. I know, that sounds boring, but trust me. Remember that phrase, tenants in common. It's important. It means we each owned an undivided half of the property, and legally, he couldn't touch my half. Everything was great for a while. Then things started to get icy. Small arguments turned into huge fights. He started staying out late. And honestly, he stopped contributing to the house too. He'd forget to pay his share of the bills. He'd criticize everything I did. The house that was supposed to be our dream was becoming a prison.
The night it happened, the night he threw me out, was over something so stupid. A dirty dish, a single leftover cereal bowl on the coffee table.
He came in from a night out, saw the bowl, and just snapped. He started screaming about how I was lazy, how I didn't respect his space, how he was sick of me. He kept repeating, "This is my house. You don't call the shots here." I finally yelled back, "It's our house, Mark." I put down the deposit. I paid for half of everything. That's when he walked into the master bedroom, opened the closet, and started throwing my clothes into 2 big black contractor bags. Not folding them, just shoving them. He dragged the bags to the front door, unlocked it, and physically pushed me out onto the porch. He was strong, and I was so shocked I just stumbled. I landed hard on the welcome mat.
"Don't come back," he sneered. "I'm changing the locks tomorrow. You can send a mover for the rest of your junk, but you are done here. Finished." Then the steel door slammed, the deadbolt clicked, and I was standing there in the dark with 2 plastic bags and the absolute sickening realization that I had nowhere to go. My car was parked down the street. My purse was still inside. Everything.
I sat there for 20 minutes, shivering, feeling the humiliation burn. The neighbors must have heard the screaming. They probably saw me sitting there like trash. This man, this person I loved, just threw away 6 years and $70,000 of my money in less than 5 minutes. Panic is a funny thing. It makes you feel small and helpless. But once I got to my friend Sarah's couch, bless her soul, she woke up at 1 a.m. to let me in. The panic started to turn into something else. It turned into pure, icy cold fury. The first thing I did was call my bank to stop all joint payments. I paused my automatic transfers for the mortgage and the utilities. The last thing I was going to do was continue paying for a house where I was sleeping on a couch miles away. The next morning, I woke up with a plan, a terrifying, high stakes plan. The whole time Mark was screaming, he was operating on a lie. He thought because he was physically in the house, he was the owner. He thought possession was 9/10 of the law.
He forgot one thing: the paper, the official document, the deed.
I knew I had digital copies of all our closing papers on an external hard drive. I didn't want to break back in. That would make me the criminal. I told Sarah, I need my laptop. I need those documents. It took a frantic hour of searching through email archives and a cloud backup, but I found it. The closing statement, the title deed. I blew it up on the screen, and there it was in crisp, legal, black and white.
Mark's name, my name, co-owners, tenants in common.
The lawyer who handled the closing had told us this document gives you equal rights to access and enjoy the property. Mark's action, kicking me out. That's not equal. That's not enjoyment. That's ouster. I felt a surge of energy. This wasn't just a breakup anymore. This was a legal wrong, and he was about to find out that sometimes the law is far more powerful than a locked door.
I knew I couldn't fight this alone. I needed a shark, a professional who dealt with this kind of ridiculous entitlement every day. I found a property law firm online and booked the first appointment. I sat down with a man named Mr. Hayes. He was old school, thin gray suit, sharp glasses. And when I finished my story, the $70,000 down payment, the 6 years, the dirty dish, the sidewalk exile. He didn't even flinch. He just nodded slowly.
Miss, he said, tapping a pen on my deed copy, Mr. Harrison has committed what the law calls an ouster. He explained it simply. Since we were tenants in common, we both had an equal right to possession. Mark kicking me out wasn't just mean, it was illegal because it deprived me of my legal right to be there. I asked him, so what can we do? Can the police force him to let me back in? He shook his head. The police won't want to touch this. It's a civil matter, a domestic dispute wrapped in a property dispute. We don't want a restraining order. We want the house. Then he leaned forward. And this is where the real plan started to form. The plan that would make Mark regret that cereal bowl for the rest of his life. We are going to file a partition action, he said. He explained that in a partition action, a judge basically says, okay, these two people can't coexist on this property. We have to divide it. Since you can't exactly cut a house in half, the judge has three options: partition in kind, rare for a house, like cutting the yard in half, forced sale. The court forces the sale of the house, and the proceeds are split. Buyout. One co-owner is forced to buy the other co-owner's interest. Mr. Hayes looked at me. Your ex has given us all the evidence we need. He has changed the locks. That's a clear act of ouster. He has refused you access. We are going to demand one of two things. He immediately buys out your full interest, including that $70,000 down payment you can document, or we force the sale. Before we filed the papers, Mr. Hayes told me we needed to get bulletproof evidence. He said he was changing the locks, right? Mr. Hayes asked. We need proof. This was the hardest part. I had to go back to the house. I parked my car a block away. I walked up the driveway, heart pounding like a drum solo. I tried my old key. It didn't work. He had actually done it. I took out my phone and I filmed everything. I filmed myself trying the key in the top lock, the bottom lock. I narrated the video. Today is Tuesday, September 15th. This is the house at 123 Oak Street. My name is Harper, a co-owner. My key no longer works. The locks have been changed without my consent. That video was the smoking gun. It proved the ouster, the illegal act of exclusion. I also saved every nasty text he had sent me, the one saying, "You don't belong here," the one saying, "Find your own place." I was building a wall of proof that a judge couldn't ignore. But let's be real, this wasn't cheap. Mr. Hayes's retainer was almost $5,000. That's $5,000 just to start the fight. The emotional cost was even higher. Every time I looked at the deed, I was reminded that I was paying for a house I couldn't live in, fighting a person I used to share a bed with. It was exhausting. But I kept reminding myself of the big prize, not just the house, but the principle. He took my home. I was going to take his comfort. The moment of truth came 2 weeks later. Mr. Hayes filed the partition action and attached a formal demand letter. The demand was simple and brutal. Pay me $150,000 for my share of the equity and my $70,000 down payment, or face a court-ordered sale. We didn't mail the papers. We had them personally served. Imagine this. Mark is sitting on the couch watching TV, living his best life in my house. A man in a suit knocks on the door. Mark opens it, expecting maybe a pizza delivery. Instead, the server hands him a thick packet of official court documents. The papers literally used the word summons. Mr. Hayes later told me that Mark's lawyer called him the same afternoon. Mark was in a full-blown meltdown. He thought I was just going to disappear. He thought he had won. He never expected me to fight. He certainly never expected the court to get involved. His lawyer's first words: "She can't do this. This is completely out of line. She can't force a sale." Mr. Hayes, cool as ice, just said, "Yes, she can. She's a co-owner and your client committed an ouster. We are prepared for trial. Let's talk about the buyout number." The shock was working. The fear was real. But Mark wasn't going to go down without a fight. Now Mark started to play dirty. First, he started calling me, not to apologize, to threaten me. "You are going to ruin my credit," he screamed over the phone. "If you make me sell, I'm going to tell everyone what you did. I'm going to sue you for emotional distress." I did what Mr. Hayes told me: do not engage. I hung up every time. I blocked his number on my cell and only communicated through the lawyers. He was trying to get a reaction, to make me emotional and reckless. I refused to give him the satisfaction. But then Mark's lawyer tried a clever but ultimately doomed tactic. They tried to claim that I was the one who abandoned the property, and therefore I owed Mark rent for the time he was paying the full mortgage. This is where Mr. Hayes shut them down immediately. He filed a motion back with the court that stated, "My client was not a voluntary absentee. She was forcibly excluded. She was ousted by your client changing the locks. Therefore, your client is the one liable for occupancy rent to my client." You heard that right. Mark thought I owed him money, but because he kicked me out while my name was still on the deed, he was actually liable to pay me rent for the privilege of living in the house alone. He was living in my half of the house for free, which meant he owed me half the fair market rental value for every single month I was out. The judge agreed. The pressure on Mark just doubled. Now he was facing a court-ordered sale, paying for a lawyer, and potentially having to pay me back rent. The man who kicked me out of my house was now going to pay me for the time I wasn't there. It was beautiful. The next big step in the partition action was the appraisal. This is how the court figures out what the house is actually worth. Mark and I had to agree on an appraiser, or the court would appoint one. We finally settled on an independent appraiser. When she showed up at the house, Mark was clearly trying to make the house look perfect. Fresh flowers, all his clutter gone. He was panicking that a low appraisal would mean he'd get less money if the house sold. The appraisal came back a week later. The housing market had been great. The house we bought for $350,000 was now worth $450,000. This gave us our final powerful number. Here's the math. Broken down simply: house value, $450,000. Remaining mortgage, let's say $250,000. Total equity, $200,000. If we split the equity 50-50, I was owed $100,000. But wait, Mark had forgotten something big. That $70,000 down payment was mine. Legally, the court would typically subtract my proven contribution from the total equity before the 50-50 split, or treat it as a separate debt he owed me. Mr. Hayes argued that because I paid the entire down payment and Mark couldn't prove he ever paid me back, I should be credited first. The final number we demanded Mark pay to buy me out: my $70,000 initial investment, my $100,000 share of the equity growth, plus a few thousand for the occupancy rent he owed me. The total buyout price was now over $175,000, and if he couldn't come up with it, the house had to be sold. The judge ordered us to mediation before setting a trial date. This was our last chance to settle before the court forced a sale and really started charging Mark expensive legal fees. I walked into that mediation room, and seeing Mark after months was weird. He looked tired, stressed. The stress of trying to keep a house you illegally stole from someone was written all over his face. He immediately started with the waterworks. "Please, Harper," he pleaded, "we can work this out. We can put the house back on the market, but let's wait 6 months. I can't afford a sale right now. Don't ruin my life." I just stared at him. I remembered the cereal bowl. I remembered the porch. I remembered sleeping on Sarah's couch. My lawyer, Mr. Hayes, cut in. "Mark, we have a court date. The judge is ready to sign the partition by sale order. Your only option now is to buy out my client's $175,000 interest, or we sell. The choice is yours." Tick tock. Mark's lawyer tried to argue the down payment. They tried to argue the rent. They tried to say the house was appraised too high. But Mr. Hayes had documents for everything: the mortgage application, the closing statement, the proof of my $70,000 wire transfer, the video of the locked door. There was no escaping it. Mark was trapped by his own arrogance and the clear language on the deed. Mark finally looked at his lawyer and whispered something. His lawyer cleared his throat. "Okay," the lawyer said, defeated. "My client can offer $140,000. That's our final offer. We will scramble to get a new loan and pay her out."
$140,000. It was close. It was a huge amount of money, but it wasn't the number. It wasn't everything he owed me, and it certainly didn't pay for the time I spent scared and stressed.
I leaned forward. I spoke for the first time in the mediation. "Mark," I said, "you threw me out of my own home. You changed the locks. You called it your house. You owe me $175,000, not a penny less." I looked at Mr. Hayes. He gave me a tiny nod. If you can't pay the full number, I continued, then I want the house sold immediately. I want a for sale sign in the yard by the end of the week. That's my final word. The room went silent. Mark was panicking. He didn't want the house to sell. He had too much personal stuff tied up in it. He couldn't afford the loss of control. He looked absolutely sick. It took another week of scrambling, but Mark found a way to get a new mortgage loan, a huge one. He had to refinance the house alone, which meant a massive monthly payment he barely qualified for. He also had to swallow his pride and pay me the full $175,000. He didn't just have to pay me back, he had to essentially buy his own house back from me at a high price, all because he was too arrogant to check the deed and too cold hearted to respect my right to the property. I received the cashier's check for the full amount, $175,000. It was the biggest number I had ever seen with my name on it.
I walked away from that 6-year relationship and that house not only whole, but with a massive profit. I used that money to buy a beautiful small place that is all mine. No cosigner, no partner, just my name on the deed.
And Mark? He's stuck in a house he can barely afford, with a massive mortgage, a huge amount of debt, and the knowledge that I beat him. He thought a cheap argument and a locked door were enough to steal my half of the house. He learned that in the eyes of the law, the deed is everything.
The moral of the story is simple, and if you're ever in a co-ownership situation, you need to remember this. A locked door doesn't change a signed document. Don't let anyone scare you out of what is legally yours. Get a lawyer, get the paperwork, and fight for every single penny.
I was kicked out of my house, but I ended up walking away with a check big enough to buy two more.
If you've ever had someone try to take advantage of you, drop a like on this video and subscribe for more stories about when people play dirty and the law steps in to clean up the mess. Thank you for watching until the very last sentence.